Is this yours? Okay.
The House Transportation Committee for February 1st, 2022 is now in session. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Representatives Boyd, Campbell, Girls, Halford, Hicks, Hurt, Kiesling, Marsh, McKenzie, Potts, Powers, Rudd, Russell, Thompson, Todd, Towns, Vidal, Weaver, Whitson, Vice Chairman Hall, Chairman Howe.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Any personal orders, announcements from the committee? Seeing none, I want to welcome our newest member to the Transportation Committee, Chairman Tim Rudd. And Representative Vidal is no longer the newest member. He's been usurped by Mr. Rudd. Glad to have you with us, and I hope you enjoy the committee as much as I do. I apologize for my voice. I'm not sick. I just have laryngitis. I get this every year about this time, and I feel fine. Members, we do not have a calendar today, but we do have some very special guests, and we're glad that they're here. I think they're going to be sharing some very good information that you will appreciate. And our guests are first presenters, Donna England, President and CEO of the Tennessee Trucking Association, and we'll follow that with Interim Commissioner and Deputy Commissioner of TDOT, who will give us an update on the Improve Act, and that'll be interesting as well. So at this time, Ms. England, if you'd like to come forward and take a seat there at the chair and make sure the mic is on, please. And for the benefit of those at home who may be watching, believe it or not, there are people who get up and watch this.
Thank you, Chairman Howe. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with everyone today and to give you an update on the state of trucking in Tennessee. My name is Donna England, and I am the President and CEO of the Tennessee Trucking Association and Vice President of our Tennessee Trucking Foundation. We have a lot of things going on in our industry that I'm sure you've been seeing on the news. One of the missions of our association is to safely advance our mission is to safely keep Tennessee on the move. We have so many truck
Ms. England, could
crashes.
you pull your mic a little closer to you?
Is
Thank
that
you.
better?
That's better.
Okay.
And
We
but
have-
members, excuse me, I won't interrupt you anymore. Members, this should be on your dashboard if you can't see the screen very well. Thank you. Continue.
Okay, thank you. We have so many fatalities in our state, not only in our state, but across our country. So it's our top priority is safety. This number that you see on the screen is the number that the American Trucking Associations has predicted that we're short truck drivers. This is a huge number for our industry. When we think about how many truck drivers we're short, and then you think about all the goods that you receive by truck, this is a huge number. So one of the things that we're most interested in is how do we get more drivers in our industry? And as we go along this morning, I'm going to touch on a couple of ideas that we have that we think will be important to help that. The American Trucking Associations did this survey last year. They concluded that pre-pandemic, we were 60,000 drivers short in our industry. And then, of course, in 2021, that's where the 80,000 number comes from. And as you see, it just continues to rise. The American Trucking Associations is predicting that by 2030, we will be short 160,000 truck drivers. When you think about that, you also have to wonder, why are we short this many truck drivers? And what can we do to increase these numbers? If we continue trending the way we're trending, it will take over 1 million drivers to enter our industry to be able to have enough drivers by 2030. If you look at where these drivers are going, some of these drivers are retiring early. The ones that are aging out, you can see by this screen, there's tons of more drivers aging out of our industry, and we're not getting the new folks in our industry. Industry growth is another reason that we are in need of truck drivers. And then you have drivers leaving our industry before retirement. The pandemic, I think, encouraged a lot of that, because when truck drivers are out on the road and their truck stops are shutting down, they won't let them come in to use the restrooms. The rest areas are shutting down, won't let them stop and rest. I think a lot of drivers just decided to get out of the industry. So not only do we have an aging workforce, we have drivers leaving our industry prior to them normally their normal retirement age that they would stay. Also, some of those contributing factors, it's not one single factor that these drivers are leaving or we're not able to get more drivers in our industry. There's not one single fact that adds up to, there's a lot of facts that add up to why we need more drivers and why we can't get them. Lifestyle is another issue. Lifestyles with our truckers, our long haul truckers, being out on the road 5, 6, 7, 10 days at a time and coming home, and they only get to spend a few days with their family. I know, speaking to a lot of our members, they're working on ways that they can address this and get the drivers home on a more regular basis. And also, other ways to help them be able to communicate with their families when they're out on the road. I thought I would share some of the Tennessee Trucking Fast Facts. These are put on or put out here by ATRI, which is the American Transportation Research Institute. In Tennessee, they tell us that we have 202,640 trucking jobs. This means that we have 1 in 13 jobs in our industry in trucking. The wages, and this is a number from 2019, exceeded $9.4 billion. We have over 61,000 tractor trailer drivers and heavy drivers in the state of Tennessee. That annual salary is $48,000. Some of the issues with truck driving is a lot of truck drivers don't think they're paid enough. So a lot of our companies are increasing that pay to hopefully encourage them to stay. ATRI also puts out a critical top industry survey that they do every year, and they tell us these are the top 10 issues across the country. One of those, can you guess what our top one is? It's, of course, the truck driver shortage. The second one on that list is driver retention. It is, of course, one of the most important things with our carriers right now is trying to figure out, because we do have a shortage, how do we retain the drivers that we have? And one of those ways is to increase their pay. Well, you can only increase their pay so much, or the companies won't be able to stay in business. So there's got to be other ways to encourage the drivers to stay and to continue working for us. And one of those, I think this number, 48,500, it's a 2020 number. Those numbers in 2021, you'll see, I think that average annual salary will increase because the companies have had to increase their pay rates. Very important that we take care of our truck drivers. Transporting the essentials. It's sad to think that it took a pandemic for our truck drivers to get the recognition that they've deserved for years. When you think about all the truck drivers out there, they're making sure that you have food to eat, you have clothes to wear, you have all the furniture in your house, appliances. The housing market is booming in Tennessee. They're making sure that you have all the goods to build these homes. And it is, these truck drivers do a lot for us. And I think that we don't recognize them as much as we should. So it's important for us that they get the recognition and we give them a pat on the back for the job that they do for us. They are essential workers. 93.8% of manufactured tonnage is transported by trucks in Tennessee. So if you think about it, that's a huge number that comes in by truck. 90.5% of Tennessee communities depend exclusively on trucks to move their goods through Tennessee. If you take, for example, where I'm from, Smithville, Tennessee, we would not have anything if it weren't for trucks. We do not have, you know, we have a small airport, we don't have waterways, and we don't have trains coming through Smithville, Tennessee. With that being said, we depend exclusively on trucks to deliver our goods. The Drive Safe Act, which was introduced with the infrastructure, it was voted in with the infrastructure plan. It has actually changed its name. It is called the Truck Driver Apprenticeship Program. It is a pilot that they're going to open up for 3 years to 18 to 20-year-olds. This is one of those important factors that we think will help alleviate some of the driver shortage. Once it's opened, FMCSA, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, is working on advancing this as quickly as possible to get it started. The companies that are going to be let into the training program to be able to train these 18 to 20-year-olds will have to meet certain criteria. They will have to have safety devices on their trucks. They will have to have inward and outward, forward-facing, outward-facing cameras. They will also have to have an experienced driver that's at least 26 years of age with 2 years or more experience, or 2 years or more with that company, as well as 5 years experience in the industry. And then these trainees will have to complete some extensive training, which is more than what they have to do now. It'll be a total of 400 hours in 2 probationary periods before they will be allowed to operate in interstate commerce. Currently, right now, the 18 to 20-year-olds are allowed to operate in intrastate commerce. They just can't cross state lines. In Tennessee, some states let them wide open from one end of to the other end. In Tennessee, we do have a limit where they can only travel within a 100 air mile radius of their home terminal. Hopefully this will help. Once this apprenticeship program starts, it will help get more folks in our industry. The young folks, we lose them when they come out of high school and we can't get them because they end up in a different career. They end up, doing one career, maybe 2 careers, and then maybe in their 30s, middle 30s, we finally get them in our industry. So it's important to find ways to bridge that gap to get them from the high school into our industry, so then we can hopefully keep them and retain them. Be Pro, Be Proud is one of those ways that we're working on trying to get into our high schools, so these students know that there is a great career path with the trucking industry. This is a mobile workshop that was started in Arkansas. Arkansas, when other states seen it, they said, "This is great. We want this in our state." There are several other states that have also done the Be Pro, Be Proud. You have South Carolina. They have 1 tractor trailer in their state. Georgia has a small mobile unit in their state. Several states are looking at this. North Carolina has gotten funding for 2 units in their state. I don't think they've got the truck up and going yet, but they do have the money to fund it. Of course, we're looking at going in partnership with 4 other associations: Tennessee Road Builders, Tennessee Forestry, the State Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and Associated Builders here in Tennessee. The mobile workforce or workshop, what it does is it has virtual stations inside the mobile workshop. You take it out, it's on a trailer, a tractor trailer, set it up, all those slide outs come out, and then you have different virtual stations. You can have up to 15 stations. One thing that I would like to invite you out to see this, the State Chamber at their annual meeting on February 22nd, we will have this mobile workshop here. So I encourage you, invite you to come out and see this mobile workshop. I think that this is the way that we can get into high schools, and we can show these students that they do have a good career in trucking. They can make anywhere from starting out as a truck driver, $45,000, and that pay just increases with the more experience they get. There's, of course, other opportunities. It's not just truck driving. We have our technicians. Technician shortage is also a part of what we're experiencing. With the technician shortage, And then as far as other career paths, you know, you don't think about it, but in our industry, you need IT folks, you need HR folks, you need, you know, just tons of administrative business, you know, folks. So we need as many folks in our industry as we can get, and we feel like that getting into the high schools is going to help with that. So please, I encourage you to check out the Be Pro, Be Proud. Truck parking was another one of those that came in the top 5 of the ATRI survey. The truck parking, this picture that you're seeing is an example of just one truck pulled over on an on-ramp. If you go across our state and you look every morning, I was coming in this morning to Nashville and I saw several tractor trailers parked on the on-ramp, on the exit ramps. This is a safety issue. There has been crashes where there's been fatalities where these tractor trailers have been parked on the on-ramps and off-ramps where somebody's hit them, maybe cross the median and run into them. So it's important for us that we try to come up with ways to create more truck parking in Tennessee. The annual cost for a driver is $5,500 or 12% annual cut in driver pay due to truck parking. And the reason is because they quit driving every day, at least 56 minutes. You know, we could lose up to 56 minutes per day with these drivers. You have to put yourself in their shoes. They have 11 hours to drive every day. And at that 10th hour, they're thinking about, where am I going to park for the night? I've got to find a place to park. So they pull into one truck stop, they drive around. And if you've ever been into any of these truck stops of an evening, they're full. So they have to get back out on the interstate and go up to the next exit, get off at this exit and see if there's any truck parking here. This is taking up their time. So at this point, they probably decide, I'm just going to pull over and park on an on-ramp or an off-ramp because I cannot find parking. So it's really important for us that we definitely help our drivers create more truck parking. The Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act was introduced in Congress last year. They are also working on it this year. It's something that hopefully, if it is passed, will give states more funding to be able to provide more truck parking. One of the things that I've seen over the years that I think has been unnecessary is all of the studies that we have done, Federal Highway has done on truck parking. You pay all these millions and millions of dollars for these studies and still don't create truck parking. We probably wouldn't be talking about truck parking if we had spent those funds on actual truck parking. So trying to come up with ways to help us and help our drivers. And of course, you know, we want them safe out there, and we do want to encourage, you know, any ideas to help improve our truck parking. At this point, I will leave it up to see if anybody has any questions for me. One thing that I would like to mention as far as trying to speed up the truck drivers getting their commercial driver's license, we've been working with the Department of Safety, CDL division, and they have been helping us come up with ideas, trying to help alleviate some of these issues. And hopefully we will be able to address those. And, you know, with the delays in testing, there's just a lot of things that we can work on as a state to make it, to improve it and make it better.
Thank you, Mrs. England. We do have some questions for you, I believe, starting off with Representative Todd. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you being here today and helping us get a feel for some of the challenges that this industry has, because I know we all rely on them very heavily. One of the things that has been brought to my attention by certainly young drivers is what appears to be the need for mechanical certification, somebody to be a certified mechanic to be able to pass the pre-inspection test. I don't know about you, but I really don't need to know how an air brake works and what the components are called in order to push the brake and make it stop. So have you heard that kind of a challenge as well, or am I just talking to an isolated group?
Well, I can tell you that I was a third-party examiner for 21 years. I've been in this industry for over 30 years, 21 of those years being a third-party examiner to test the individuals to get their commercial driver's license. The pre-trip inspection, I think, is necessary. I think that they do need to know where those components are on their vehicle. And the pre-trip inspection is not where they would ever have to work on the truck, but they need to know that if there's a safety issue before they drive that truck. And if they can look at it, check their tires, make sure that their tires are inflated, make sure they don't have any, wires showing through their tires. I think it is important for their safety as well as all the highway users to be able to know how to inspect that vehicle before they drive it.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm certainly not saying that anyone has complained about the pre-trip inspection and the necessity of that. I would certainly agree with you that that's critical. I think it can get pretty technical, at least with some testing centers, get very, very technical, which I think that may be what the complaint is about is, yes, I need to know the basics of what I need to inspect, what it's supposed to look like, the things to look for, but the specific name of a part and maybe how it functions or something like that internally. And I'm, again, that may be an exaggeration I've gotten. I don't know, but that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. And I don't know how much of a hindrance that really is to folks getting into that.
Yeah, and I guess if we could look at the pass rate, the failures, how many are failing their pre-trip inspection, that could maybe help us to determine if that might be an issue. I do know, because I've done it, that you have your, training class, and then some of that is, kind of left up to the examiner's opinion as to whether or not they inspected it correctly. So that could be some area that we could definitely work on.
Chairman Kiesling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Donna, thank you for being here. It's a good presentation. I'm glad you elaborated on the rest area situation that we're involved in. I know Senator Bailey and I a few years ago in this committee made every effort we could to try to allow parking on our ramps. Now, THP at that time was opposed to parking on the shoulder of these ramps on the off ramp, but on the get on ramp, as I call it, they didn't have a problem. But TDOT, of course, was opposed to that. The effort was defeated successfully by TDOT, but we received a promise from TDOT at that time that there would be an effort in trying to accommodate more parking. I haven't seen it, but maybe we'll hear of that in their upcoming report. I hope so. And I don't want to sound a little bit critical, but I am disappointed that I haven't seen any improvement in our, because it is, if you're not in a hole, as I call it, by 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, the travel plaza, you're out of luck. Their reasoning behind that on the ramp parking was that they just don't construct their shoulders to accommodate 80,000 pounds of stationary weight. Well, I get it. But again, nothing, I've not seen anything. Now, I want to move on to, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I have a follow-up to that. We're short 160,000 drivers. That's a national number, obviously, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay, well, 48,000 is just something almost to sneeze at, and I'm not being critical. Your membership needs to, I mean, 48,000 is just no money to be out there logging 265 days a year being away from home, and it just isn't. Of course, I'm applying that to the over-the-road OTR guys. How attractive was the platooning issue a few years ago when it passed here successfully? Has there been any movement in that software?
I think that they're still working on platooning as far as it's not going to be a one size fits all. And platooning, you can, of course, only do it in certain areas. Depends on, I think that one of our members actually tried doing the platooning process, and I'm not sure that they're even still in the works as far as trying to,
But is there an effort ongoing?
I would say, I don't know for certain. I have not spoke to any of our members about the platooning lately.
Mr. Chairman, may I have a follow-up?
You're recognized.
Sadly, our drivers aren't, a truck driver is not classified as a professional. Is that correct?
It depends on what you call a professional. I mean,
Well, dissect that for me then.
well, our truck drivers are the captain of their ship. So they do have to be professional. I think that what you end up with is attorneys that get into the mix, and if they're professional, then they're supposed to be perfect, and so that makes it really hard for companies to say, my truck driver is a professional. But we do have very professional drivers out on the roadways.
Oh, I understand that. I know that. Are you all concerned, is the association concerned with the past 48 hours, 72 hours in Canada on the efforts ongoing up there? We've got owner ops and other company drivers that are shutting down, opposed to the, to the efforts of
Yes.
Canada. Can you respond to that?
Yes, we are not opposed to the vaccine, but we are opposed to making it mandatory. So yes.
You are opposed to it
No.
being mandatory, or you're
Yes,
not?
we're opposed to it being mandatory. We
Okay.
feel like that it should be the driver's choice whether or not they're vaccinated. And yes, we do feel like that it is an issue with the Canadian border, definitely. And I'd like to address one other thing that you mentioned as far as TDOT and the rest areas. One thing that we had several of our members call us, and they've made mention or they've made comments that there are signs posted at our rest areas. And these signs say you're limited to, and I believe it's 2 hours of parking and no overnight parking. A lot of these folks don't feel like that they can park in our rest areas and do their 10-hour break that's required. So, and of course, we've reached out to TDOT about this, and TDOT has told us that that's something that they have to post in these rest areas. I'm not sure if that's what their reasoning is behind that, but it is something that I feel like that we need to address, because a lot of truck drivers park in those rest areas and ignore the signs, but a lot of them don't feel like that they can when they're passing through Tennessee because that sign is there.
Well, and further, not every tour of duty is going to conclude at 5 and 6 o'clock p.m. Tours can conclude at noon of a day. So, I mean, we have to have adequate parking for them. But again, the concern is of the evening parking, those that, it just happens that it works out that way. Donna, thank you very much again for I'm through, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very
Chairman.
much. I
Thank you.
appreciate the time. And Donna,
Thank you.
Members, I'm going to have to call a halt to this, and Mrs. England, I hope that you will, if you have time, hang around. We have several members on the list who I'm sure would love to talk to you one-on-one, but we have to give adequate time to TDOT, who's waiting patiently, and they're here. But I do appreciate you coming, and members, I apologize. We just don't have time for any more questions on this particular topic, but we'll move forward. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you, Chairman Howe.
All right. Department of Transportation, glad to have you with us today. We have with us Interim Commissioner Joel Galvado, and who is also the Chief Financial Officer for TDOT. He's got all the answers for any financial questions you may have, members. And we have Deputy Commissioner and Chief Engineer Paul Deggs and Preston Elliott, Deputy Commissioner Environmental Bureau Chief. And we are glad to have you gentlemen with us. And I'm sure from what we've heard a while ago, you'll have plenty of questions when you finish with your presentation. Sure. Commissioner, we're glad to have you with us. Please, you're recognized.
All right, thank you very much. Paul, do you want to address a little bit on the rest area real quick before we start?
Sure. Paul Deggs, Chief Engineer, Tennessee DOT. I guess I will just touch base. I know that can y'all hear me now?
There you go.
Is that better? I know truck parking is an issue, and I did want to just make a couple of comments that since about 2004, we've increased truck parking on state-owned facilities about 24%. As part of the Improve Act, we have identified some truck parking, about another 20% increase. But even those increases are are small in comparison to the need out there. I think Ms. England did a good job of kind of pointing out, and Representative Kiesling, I know, has talked about the issue of a lot. From a technology standpoint, we do have some efforts underway to try to be able to use technology to allow truck drivers to know if there's a vacancy at a truck stop. We actually did a pilot project in, I believe, Bradley County at a truck stop where we got a grant from, I believe, the Department of Energy to put technology in place to where the truckers could know if there was a vacancy. As Ms. England pointed out, one of the time wasters is getting off the interstate looking for a parking spot. So there are efforts underway. We're looking at some examples of work that's being done across the country to where we could potentially partner with the private sector and develop a more robust truck parking program. But I will note it's a prioritization issue. You know, we have a lot of competing locations where people want us to spend money. Do we spend a dollar improving capacity of a facility, improving, widening a road, or do we spend it on truck parking? And so those are some of the issues that we have to wrestle with. Some of these things are policy issues, and we certainly want to make sure that we are working with the Tennessee General Assembly to make sure that we're getting that policy decision correct. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paul. So we'll get started with our presentation. So we wanted to give you a little bit more, Chairman, than you had asked for the Improve Act. We wanted to give you the same presentation we gave to the Senate Transportation. That way, everybody's got the same information. So we want to talk about IIJA very quickly. So a very good friend of mine who is a partner in one of the biggest accounting firms said to me, he says, so you're getting $6 billion this year. What are you going to do with it? And I said, well, it's actually 6.2. But it's not in 1 year. It's over 5 years. And oh, by the way, we already got 4.5. So it is an increase, but it's not life changing. So he said, well, I don't think people understand that. So that's why we're trying to make sure everybody knows that. So I want to go through these slides very quickly. So this is where the IIJA and the FAST Act are actually comparable. So the NHPP, STBG, I won't go through all these in much detail, but those first two are our basic core programs for roads and bridges. The HSIP is for our safety projects. Rail crossings is self-explanatory. CMAQ is congestion mitigation, air quality, things to remove pollutants from the atmosphere. The metropolitan planning, that's for the MPO operations and freight projects. So that's where the IIJA and the FAST Act are actually comparable. And you can see year over year, or 5 years over 5 years, it's up 23%, which is good. There is more money there. If we go to the next page, this is where the IIJA goes away from the FAST Act. So the carbon reduction and protect initiatives, these are for resiliency and green initiatives. New programs, we don't have the eligibilities yet, but we await them to find out what we can spend them on. The bridge rehabilitation, we do actually have some guidance now, and it is pretty much, as Paul had said to us, it is going to allow us to do more bridge rehabilitation, which is good. Here's my editorial comment. So the state of Tennessee, we normally get about 2.1% of all formula funding. Because Paul's people, we inspect bridges every 2 years at least, because we constantly maintain our bridges, and because it doesn't cost an inordinate amount of money, we only got 1.1% of this money. So basically, it seems to us in Tennessee that it's rewarding bad behavior. Because we've done well, we get less of this funding. So we're not happy with that. And then there's some more money in here for the electric infrastructure, et cetera. So we want to talk about some of the facts from the Improve Act, from the IIJA. Again, $1 billion more in core programs, $700 million more in these new programs. I want to alert you to the second bullet point. So the NHPP and STBG, these are their core programs for roads and bridges. If you look at the percentage of what they were in the FAST Act versus the IIJA, and again, in the IIJA, I pulled in the bridge to be comparable. It goes from 86% to 82%. So I think it again, just on numbers, the IIJA values core road and bridge programs less than the FAST Act. Also want to alert you to that $927 million number. So over 5 years, that number is $185 million a year. If I take it out by region, it is $46 million per region. So again, the IIJA is good, but it's not life-changing to us. The 5-year bill is what we've needed. We've talked to you about this for years, so we're glad we've got that. And the increased funding, in addition to what you heard last night from the governor's address, will help us propel some of the Improve Act projects. So here are some of my concerns. So I have to put on my CFO hat now. So the Highway Trust Fund continues to give out more than it takes in. That's a problem. So the FAST Act required $70 billion to keep it solvent. Think about that, $70 billion. This new plan did not require $70 billion. It required almost $120 billion of general fund infusion. Under any definition of stable and reliable funding, one-time general fund infusion is not it. They should have taken some actions on a revenue solution, but they did not, so that's disappointing. We're also disappointed when you look at the CBO, their estimate is that $250 billion will be added to the deficit, and you know what that will do to inflation. Last bullet point I think is worth knowing. In Tennessee, we would prefer just to get the formula funding rather than having to compete, and who knows what the different eligibilities are, so we'd rather go that way. Quick overall breakdown of the IIJA. So as you can see here, this total pie totals close to $1 billion, $852 million. You can see there's many categories on here that TDOT doesn't control or have any management over. So many of you heard that we've got a new strategic plan. We have 4 pillars. We're picking this up from what Commissioner Bright has set forth. There's a data-driven pillar. There is a 25-year plan pillar, and IPD and EPIC. Want to talk a little bit about IPD. So this is integrated program and project delivery. What we're trying to do is improve our project delivery. We do a decent job today, but we can be much better. If you think about what we do, the life cycle of a project is pretty extensive. We plan for a project, then we design it, we construct it. After it's constructed, we have to maintain it. And after we maintain it and keep going on that route, we have to manage the system and manage congestion. So there's a lot involved here. And we're trying to make sure that we are more accountable for scope, schedule, and budget. When the scope creeps and gets bigger, schedules slip, and project budgets get blown out of the way. And we want to get better on that. And also in this team-based approach to delivering our projects, we will inspire innovation. On empowering people, influencing culture, this is a very big initiative for all of our employees. So I will give credit to Paul. I know we sound like our parents, but Paul told us, he said, all the kids talk about things that are epic. We've got to come up with something that's epic. So they came up with this acronym because we are not only a data-driven organization, but to provide a way to make TDOT the premier employer in Tennessee. We, the 4,000 of us who work here, think this is one of the greatest places to work. We just need to make sure other people know that and make sure we embellish that here. We are trying to increase the span of control so we don't have a bunch of supervisors who are only managing 1 or 2 people. We want to make sure we have competitive pay. We are going through an extensive analysis along with the Department of Human Resources, how to pay our people better. We want to reduce turnover. Quick facts, so we hired over 400 people last year. We lost over 475. So that spinning wheel, we just cannot keep up. We've got to find a way to reduce our turnover. And lastly, again, we want to make TDOT the employer of choice, not just for a kid coming out of college, not for someone in the middle of their career, not someone just at the end trying to give back to society, but for everybody who wants to come to TDOT. I'll pass it on to Preston for the next slide.
Try it now. Okay. Preston Elliott, Chief of Environment and Planning with TDOT. I'd like to share an update on an initiative that we've been working on for some time, especially in light of a lot of the discussion you've heard about electric vehicles and funding and so forth. This effort actually, the state of Tennessee for more than a decade has been working on alternative fuels as a component of our transportation infrastructure and mobility. The 5 fuel sources that we look at is compressed natural gas, propane, liquefied natural gas, hydrogen, and then also electric vehicles or electricity, excuse me. In the early 2000s, the state was involved in biofuels. So E85, if you have seen any of that as you traveled about the state. In recent years, since about 2016, we've really begun to help identify, plan, and designate corridors meeting a federal designation for alternative fuels, positioning ourselves for diversity of fuel options for our residents and businesses, and then also for the opportunity for additional funding to our state. On the slide that you'll see here, there are corridors along the interstate that meet several different definitions for alternative fuels. Being first in the South in terms of jobs and investment in an EV, it's quite a initiative that really fits well with our economic development and growth that we're seeing across the state. Um, this effort is not just by the department. We also collaborate and coordinate with a lot of different agencies across the state, TVA, TDEC, and other partnerships. In 2019, we actually undertook a I-40 corridor study with the states of North Carolina and Arkansas, so that as individuals travel across our state along the interstate system, if they are using an electric vehicle, they wouldn't have what's called range anxiety, whether they know where or the opportunity to fuel their vehicle. This is going to become more and more important as we move forward. Commissioner Gabato has mentioned about the $88 million that will be coming to our state for electric vehicles. There's also a discretionary grant program that allows for additional funding opportunities in that broad range of alternative fuels that I've mentioned. And that's just wanted to give a quick update on that.
So again, Paul Deggs, Chief Engineer. One of the things that I just wanted to make sure this committee's aware of, the Tennessee General Assembly was part of the recruitment effort to get the Ford Motor Plant over in West Tennessee. And I know I was with Representative Todd on Friday looking at a project in Jackson, and afterwards I went out to the mega site out there in Haywood County. And one of the things that is part of that recruitment effort is TDOT has been tasked with building several roads. If you see on the exhibit here, we've got a new interstate interchange at mile marker 39 on I-40. We need to build the State Route 194 extension that's going to connect I-40 to the north up to Highway 70, State Route 1, and to the south, State Route 59, plus a connector road that's going to connect State Route 222 with the new State Route 194 through the mega site. It's about $200 million worth of work. The Tennessee General Assembly did in the special session bring dollars to the table for TDOT to construct it. We're on a very accelerated schedule, working with Ford Motor Company to coincide our project completion and opening up the interchange for access with the opening of the facility in 2025. So it's a lot of work. We are using one of the project delivery tools, an alternative delivery tool called CMGC, Construction Manager General Contractor, that this body passed legislation that allows us to use for that alternative delivery. It's a very accelerated pace, if you can imagine, to be able to build a project like this. Fortunately, it is in a predominantly rural area where we don't have a lot of utility impacts, and we don't have numerous property owners that we have to deal with as well. Also wanted to talk about the Improve Act. I know Chairman Howell had asked us to kind of give us, well, where are we at on the Improve Act? If you'll recall, there was 962 projects in the legislation. When we start digging into delivering the projects, for instance, there's a piece of I-65 north of Nashville that it wasn't practical to deliver it all in a single project. So we broke it up into 4 pieces. And across the state, we've had to do that. So the 962 has now been subdivided into 1,017 projects, with 514 of those underway and 173 of them have been completed. One of the big pushes in the Improve Act was looking at bridge infrastructure. As Commissioner Gilbato mentioned a little while ago, we have a very strong bridge program in Tennessee that actually hurt us on the federal funding level. But I would argue that the people of Tennessee benefit from reliable bridges. There's only about 8 or 9 states in the U.S. that have more bridges than TDOT does, or the state of Tennessee does. We're blessed with a very wet environment in Tennessee. About 86% of our bridges are over water, but the Improve Act included 526 bridges on local roads. So we've been working with city and county bridge owners across the state, as well as the state highway system, to get those projects moving. So 112 are currently under construction. Again, 173 complete, 100 in the right-of-way phase, and 302 are in the preliminary engineering. This represents, again, if you just look at the total where we're at here, we're 30-40% that we still have yet to get to, but and we don't exactly know how long it's going to take. But as Commissioner Gilbato has mentioned, the core money and the IIJA is going to allow us to really ramp up. It's not a huge amount, but still about a 20% increase in these types of programs that's going to allow us to move these projects along quicker.
So that, Chairman, we'll turn it over to you all for questions.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Can you elaborate, before I turn it to the members, can you elaborate on the funding that we were pleased to hear about last night from the governor's presentation about the 100 million that goes into the Improve Act? How will that help accelerate the completion of those projects that were actually in code in the Improve Act in 2017?
Well, again, at this point, Paul, we're looking at anywhere between 11 and 12 billion remaining. So, I mean, it's helpful. It's not going to propel it 3 years ahead of time, but it will help us move forward along with the extra approximate 200 million a year in IIJA.
Yeah.
Should help us propel things forward somewhat.
Okay. And Paul, could you one more time tell me how many of those projects that was on the screen are currently under some phase of development, either environmental engineering, core drilling, or construction?
So you see the 514 underway, and you can break that down into 302 in the engineering phase, 100 in the right-of-way acquisition phase, and 112 are actively under construction right now.
Yeah.
And then 173 are complete.
Yeah.
So we're making progress, but we still, there's 1,000 projects here, and we've got, about 300 of them, a little over 300 of them left to go that we've not had a chance to get started on yet. Some of those are bridges, some of them are the larger projects. I think, Commissioner Gilbato and I have talked about this a lot. We have really the 173 that are complete, we've knocked out a lot of the real easy, the smaller bridge replacement type projects. The projects that we're starting to dig into now are some of the more difficult. I mean, interstate widening projects, some of the projects in the preliminary engineering phase, I-24 from the Georgia state line going into Chattanooga, getting around Moccasin Bend, that's going to be tough.
Yeah.
We're going to have to sharpen our pencils and do some hard math to make that one work.
And can you comment, for my constituents who were under the impression that as soon as we passed the Improve Act, we were going to get everything done in just a matter of a short time. The Improve Act actually, the funding was over a period of years. Is that correct? Can you comment on that?
Correct. So when we were asked to develop a list of projects, of course, we worked through our planning processes and stuff that we already had underway. And our charge was develop a list of projects that would be needed over the next 10 years. So from 2017, 2018 to the end of this decade. When we put that list together and we talked about how would it pay for, certainly we came up with a dollar figure, and it would have needed to be indexed. And of course, what ultimately passed in the General Assembly was about half the amount of money that we had proposed, and it did not include an indexing feature. So our ability to deliver that in 10 years was not there, and we testified to that in committee. And so, we're projecting somewhere in the, 20, 25-year time frame from when the bill was passed. With the new IIJ A money and the one-time money for the General Assembly, it's going to allow us to improve on those schedules. It's very hard, inflation is pretty rampant right now, probably over 5% in our industry, and our revenue is better, but it as Commissioner Gilbato mentioned, we've not got a windfall in funding as of yet.
Okay. We do have several questions, people on the list, and we're short on time, members. So if you could keep your questions as brief as possible for our guests. Representative Grills, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and gentlemen, for being here. Just real quick, that $100 million, will that even walk with will it even walk with inflation as far as what it's going to do to your budget?
Well, so last year we let $1.3 billion worth of projects to contract, ranging from mowing contracts, to, widening Highway 60 in Bradley County.
Yeah.
And so, and 5% of $1.3 billion, it's a lot of money. You do the math there, 50-something, $60 million. So, but still, there's somebody getting $100 million worth of work across the state somewhere.
I could help you spend that if you needed to. My questions really are about maintenance. How do you evaluate, and maybe you're going to come back at a later date. Is that the plan, to talk about some of the maintenance issues and
Well,
different things across the state?
We'll talk about that. What we've always tried to make sure everyone understands. So when we put our budget together, the first thing we do is we take money off the top for state of good repair. So put it in perspective. So we always spend a lot of money. In 2020, we spent $360 million. That's a lot of money off the top. It's not $360 million today. It's $440 million. And our budget for fiscal 23 calls for $460 million. So we do, as we say, we fix it first. So we take care of our infrastructure first, but we'll probably talk more about that in our budget hearing in front of you all.
Yeah, with two rough winters, certainly this time of year, our pavements are showing distress, but we'll get that cleaned back up, though.
You have a follow-up?
Mr. Chairman, I'll just wait until we have that.
Very good. Representative Towns, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought you're just going to blow over me, Mr. Chairman, last time and this time and right time, and we're here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Paul's always good to see y'all. Y'all do a great job. I always learn a tremendous amount. Okay? But I have a couple of three things myself. You talked about the energy mix, and anybody can take it and make it short for me. That energy mix, is solar a part of that energy mix now as you relate to, I know there are airplanes that are flying around the world utilizing solar energy. So is that a part of the truck in the future that may be using that solar kind of energy? See, if it is, it is. If not, it's not.
Yeah, a very good question. Solar is obvious.
Your name.
Preston Elliott, Chief of Environment Planning. Your comment about solar, I think you're seeing more and more applications of it in our industry. Everything from supporting signals to lighting. There's solar farm in West Tennessee. You see off of I-40.
Yeah,
There's more desire as we look at the alternative fuel component, specifically on electric. If you're trying to work towards zero emissions, you need a renewable energy source because at current time, that's going to be supported by other electric generation. So solar is an important component to that. I think you'll see more and more as the technology improves.
Okay, thank you for that.
Just real quick, in Shelby County, our rest area on I-55 is a LEED certified zero energy footprint building. It has solar components and passive solar technology in it.
Okay. Secondly, as you know, down there, we had a debacle down there with the bridge down there. And the mayors and the chamber and a lot of us, we're interested in a third bridge in that area. So Dwayne and I talked about that, and we even reached out to federally and want to talk to you all about making sure that's a possibility. We lost hundreds of millions of dollars just in a little span of time, not to even think about, but potentially could have happened to human beings in terms of safety.
Sure. So I'll handle it first, Paul, if you want to add anything to it. So I'm actually meeting with the Secretary of Arkansas this week to talk about what they think as well, as far as a third bridge, where it would go, the costs. Right now, as far as we're concerned, again, I have to put on my CFO hat. The cost is extensive. It's probably at least a $2 billion project for a brand new bridge. So we're looking at some different alternatives. So is a third bridge the alternative? Is tearing down the I-55 bridge and creating a bigger, wider bridge the best issue? We're trying to figure that out. But well, again, it'll involve most likely having to get something out of these federal grants in Washington. Remember, on this IIJA, there's about $27 billion of bridge money out there for significant bridges. We would like to go after some of that, but as you all know, we're not usually really successful at getting that. The last time we got any significant grant was for Lamar Avenue at $71 million. So, but we are looking at that, Representative.
Well, let me share this with you. At the federal level, they've already said that they would help us. Okay, that's coming from Buttigieg's office. Okay, that they would help us, and we want to make sure that Dwayne and myself are involved in that with Arkansas, because I'm talking to people over there as well. Now, the third bridge itself is important because of a number of reasons, transporting of goods and services. However, we're in an earthquake zone. Okay, if you got to get people in and out, okay, we need to have multiple modes of being able to transport people. I don't know what that looks like. However, that's frightening to think about, but it could happen. God forbid that it does. And widening a bridge, we can't stand for a bridge to be down at this point, for one to be torn down, and one bridge just will not cut it. It's not going to do it. Traffic was backed up forever down there during that time, and everybody's complaining. And then you talk about emissions in the neighborhood, the whole 9 yards. So we'd like to be included in that particular area because we're the only two from Shelby County that are on this committee.
Yes, sir. So, I mean, we will involve everybody, all the key stakeholders, but at first point, I just want to give the Secretary of Arkansas her ability to chime in as to what they can do. Again, it is a financial issue, and I've heard the Secretary Buttigieg has said he's going to help. But what does help mean? Does help mean $250 million of a $2 billion project? Does it mean $1.5 billion? So, you know, all these things remain to be seen. So, and as far as your seismic question, sir, I mean, you might want to talk about I-55 and how it needs to be retrofit for that.
Before you go to that, help means to me old-fashioned do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, some money, the real money, and it's going to cost more in the future to do it, and it's going to have to eventually be done at some point. We need the money. I think we should make the ask for what it is and line our people up. And then the deal is you have three components. You got Arkansas, ourselves, and then you got the federal government. It's not going to get any cheaper. It's not going to get any cheaper. Nothing in this world gets cheaper. Okay.
Members, we do have some additional questions
Go ahead,
from members
Mr.
who
Chairman.
have to leave. We have to give up this room in about 3 minutes, but let's
Oh,
move
thank you,
on
Mr. Chairman.
to Chair Lady Weaver.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, TDOT, for being here. Real quickly, I know that TDOT focuses on their priority on safety. And I have constituents who are watching this committee meeting right now with this concern with blowouts, windshield damages, and tractor trailers losing their ability to stay on the road because of the mass amounts of peeling and all this, whatever this mix is that is on, especially between the Smith County line going east and west into Putnam County. It's extremely dangerous. I drive it in the morning and at night. I'd like to know, and we can do this discussion later, but I'd really like for you to speak to the mix recipe, what we have done, how we're going to improve that mix, because we should never go to that recipe again because it's not working, especially as you mentioned in lieu of a lot of water we have had and the salt and brine that eats this stuff up. So how soon will you be able to tend to that emergency area on the interstate going east and west from the Smith County line and the Putnam
Sure.
County
So
line. Thank
Paul
you.
Diggs, Chief Engineer. So the short answer is we already have an emergency contract through our contracting mechanism in place. It's temperature limited. I will note that the type of failures that we're seeing out there are in a lot of different areas. Again, the bad weather, but it's an open graded friction course is the type of pavement that we're seeing most of the failures. I will note that that pavement has, our data shows a 34% reduction in wet crashes through the life of the pavement. So the balance that we're trying to get from a safety standpoint is if I see a 34%, decrease in crashes because the type of pavement we're using reduces spray, reduces hydroplaning, that's a good thing. But when it's at the end of its useful life and then we get bad weather, it's coming up, that's what we're trying to deal with. So I want to be careful and not to throw the baby out with the bathwater here. I've had members of the General Assembly comment to me about what's that new asphalt that you don't get spray when you go past an 18-wheeler. That's this type of asphalt, and so there's pros and cons. But I know that our customers are struggling right now. We are hurrying to get out there and do it. It's not just I-40. We've got some spots across the state. We've got a construction zone north of Nashville that it came loose on us. So we're working to it, but we do a lot of research in the asphalt area, and we're trying to make sure that we provide our customers the best safety experience. But certainly we don't like the fact that it's come to pieces. If we just paved it last year, we would probably beat ourselves, beat us to the punch. But 3 big winter storms have been done a number on that type of asphalt that's at the end of its life.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. We are out of time. We have to give up this room, but I want to thank each of you for coming. Good information, and we'll continue this conversation the next time you come to the committee. But I want to, just for the record, you guys have a very difficult job. I know that. I think the committee knows that because everybody hates potholes. And you do a really good job overall, I think, and I just want to commend you and thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Chairman.
Members, do I hear a motion to adjourn? We are adjourned.